The crowd was deafening, lights blinding, cameras flashing. Ronda Rousey wasn't just walking into the octagon. She was stepping into a destiny she had been crafting since childhood. For years, she wasn't simply a fighter, she was a force of nature. Her dominance in the UFC made her the face of women's mixed martial arts, the queen of the cage. But behind the highlight reels, behind the belts and the fame, there was another story. A story she never told until recently. One that reveals how the very system that elevated her was also the system that broke her down, pushed her out, and nearly destroyed her. Her story didn't begin with the UFC. It began with hardship. Born into a family where toughness wasn't optional, Rousey's mother, Anne Maria DeMars, had already blazed her own trail by becoming the first American woman to win a world judo championship. Ronda grew up in an environment where resilience wasn't a choice, it was survival. She struggled with a speech impediment, often mocked by other kids, and at the age of 8, she suffered the unimaginable loss of her father to suicide. That grief could have broken her, but instead, it sharpened her resolve. Pain became fuel. Determination became her armor. That armor carried her all the way to the 2008 Olympics in Beijing, where she made history as the first American woman to win an Olympic medal in judo, earning bronze. But Rousey wasn't satisfied with medals alone. She wanted more. She wanted to dominate. So when she stepped into MMA, she carried that same intensity with her, and the world wasn't ready. In Strikeforce, she didn't just win, she demolished. She turned submission grappling into an art of destruction. Her arm bars so fast and so brutal that opponents barely had time to react before they were tapping in agony. She had something few fighters ever possessed: inevitability. She walked into cages with the look of someone who knew the outcome before the bell even rang. The UFC couldn't ignore her. Dana White, who once publicly claimed women would never fight in his organization, reversed his stance. He signed Rousey as the UFC's first female fighter, instantly making her the face of an entire movement. She didn't just bring women into the UFC, she became the foundation on which the entire women's division was built. Her debut in 2013 was a statement. A first-round armbar victory, setting the stage for one of the most dominant streaks in MMA history. She won 12 straight fights, most in under a minute. The UFC marketed her as unstoppable, and for a while, she was. She headlined pay-per-views that shattered records. She graced the covers of magazines. Hollywood cast her in blockbuster films. She wasn't just an athlete anymore, she was a brand, a cultural icon, a household name. But the higher she climbed, the tighter the machine squeezed. Every interview, every photo shoot, every public appearance was dictated by the UFC's agenda. She became less of a fighter and more of a product. At first, she played the role. Smiles for the camera, endorsements for the sponsors, sound bites for the media. But privately, the cracks were beginning to form. Her body was paying the price. Torn ligaments, aching knees, concussions that left her foggy. Training camps became grueling marathons of punishment, leaving her battered before she even stepped into the cage. And yet, the pressure never let up. The UFC's demands only grew louder. Sponsors wanted more time. Media wanted more access. The company wanted her at every event, every photo shoot, every press conference. Friends and training partners noticed the shift. She smiled less. She spoke less. She looked drained, guarded, as if carrying a weight she couldn't share. And that weight was only growing heavier. Behind the scenes, there were whispers. Disagreements with management. Heated arguments about scheduling and media obligations. Quiet resistance to the UFC's control. The promotion had its ways of rewarding loyalty and punishing defiance, and Rousey was beginning to see it up close. Fighters who played along got better matchups, better pay-per-view points, better media coverage. Those who resisted often found themselves sidelined, their careers quietly stalled. For years, Rousey managed to navigate around these pressures. But the breaking point came when she refused to fully comply with certain promotional demands tied to sponsors. The UFC wanted her to endorse companies she didn't believe in, products she didn't want her name attached to. She pushed back. And suddenly the power dynamic shifted. The timing couldn't have been worse. She had just suffered her first loss in the UFC, a shocking knockout against Holly Holm that shook the entire sport. For the first time, Rousey wasn't invincible. For the first time, her bargaining power was fragile. And the UFC knew it. By 2016, after the company had been sold for over $4 billion to WMEIMG, priorities changed. Corporate sponsors became the true lifeblood of the promotion. Fighters weren't just athletes anymore, they were marketing tools. Mandates trickled down. Endorse these products. Attend these events. Avoid saying anything that might upset advertisers. For Rousey, it was suffocating. She refused to shill for a controversial energy drink heavily backed by UFC executives. She declined certain promotional shoots. And soon after, rumors began swirling. Anonymous media sources questioned her dedication, her training, her focus. Whispers circulated that she had lost her edge. To Rousey, it felt orchestrated. A coordinated effort to weaken her image and force her hand. Other fighters privately confirmed similar experiences. Some admitted they had been pressured to endorse sponsors they didn't want to be associated with. Others revealed that rankings and fight bookings were quietly influenced by compliance. The UFC didn't need to put anything in writing. Everyone just understood the rules: play along or pay the price. For Rousey, the realization was crushing. Winning fights wasn't enough anymore. Staying at the top wasn't just about skill, it was about obedience. She described it later as the moment everything shifted. She wasn't just a fighter. She was a product in a system that could erase her without ever admitting it. The breaking point came with her planned comeback at UFC 207 against Amanda Nunes. Publicly, it was billed as her redemption. Privately, she knew the fight carried different stakes. Promotional materials oddly emphasized Nunes instead of her. Negotiations behind the scenes became battles over logos, sponsors, and media appearances. She limited her interviews, wary of questions that might expose the rift. By the time she walked into the cage, her relationship with the UFC was already fractured. The fight ended in less than a minute. Rousey was dismantled, overwhelmed by Nunes striking. For fans, it was shocking. For Rousey, it was confirmation of what she already knew. The UFC was done with her. The aftermath was brutal. Instead of protecting their fallen star, the UFC amplified her downfall. They replayed her losses, pushed narratives of her decline, and quietly shifted focus to their new champions. It wasn't just the end of her reign, it was an erasure. After UFC 207, new contracts were floated her way. On the surface, they looked like opportunities, but the details told a different story. Sponsorship obligations, mandatory appearances, scripted interviews, every clause designed to strip away her autonomy. Training access became more difficult. Promotional shoots were canceled without explanation. Fight offers placed her in undercard slots, beneath fighters she had once headlined over. To Rousey, it wasn't incompetence, it was strategy. A slow, calculated push to force her out. She made her choice. Quietly, without fanfare, she walked away. No emotional retirement speech, no farewell fight. Just silence. A silence that spoke louder than any announcement. Years later, she broke that silence. In an unfiltered interview, she laid it all out. She accused the UFC of operating on an unwritten system of compliance, rewarding fighters who fell in line, punishing those who didn't. She claimed that rankings were manipulated, opportunities withheld, and narratives planted in the media to protect the company's interests. She alleged that fighters were sometimes pressured to fight through serious injuries to keep events intact, putting their health at risk for the sake of profit. Her revelations sent shockwaves through the MMA world. Some fighters spoke out in support, hinting at similar experiences. Others stayed quiet, unwilling to jeopardize their careers. The UFC issued a short denial, dismissing her comments as disappointing. But fans couldn't unhear what she had said. Her fall from grace was no longer seen as just the natural decline of a fighter. It was seen as the result of a system that had built her up, used her, and discarded her when she no longer served its purposes. After MMA, Rousey reinvented herself in WWE, where her star power filled arenas and her storylines captivated audiences. Hollywood offered her roles that kept her in the spotlight, albeit with mixed reviews. But no matter how far she moved from the octagon, the shadow of her UFC story followed her. Her legacy remains complicated. To some, she's a bitter former champion unwilling to accept the end of her career. To others, she's a trailblazer who not only changed the sport but exposed its darkest truths. She forced fans and fighters alike to question the UFC's glittering empire. How much of it was built on athletic merit, and how much on silenced fighters, hidden deals, and corporate control? Ronda Rousey's story isn't just about victories or defeats. It's about the cost of greatness, the politics of power, and the courage to speak when silence would be easier.